Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Andrii Kostin was appointed as the Prosecutor General of Ukraine in July last year. He is a graduate from Odessa National University's law faculty, and he subsequently practiced as a lawyer at the firms of Polonsky and Partners and then Pravo, of which he became the director. He was a familiar face in that time at the IBA, rising to be a member of the IBA Council from 2013 to 2015. In 2019, Prosecutor General Kostin was elected as a member of Ukraine's parliament, where he headed the Legal Policy Committee and chaired the subcommittee responsible for implementing the decisions of the European Court of Human Rights. He also participated in the negotiations with the Russian Federation in Istanbul in 2022. On the 30th anniversary of Ukraine's independence, President Zelensky awarded him the title of Honored Lawyer of Ukraine for his significant professional achievements and years of ethical work. As chief prosecutor, he identifies among his main priorities bringing war criminals to justice, upholding the integrity and independence of prosecutors, and promoting a prosecution service based on the rule of law and human rights. Prosecutor Kostin also writes a regular column for the IBA's online publication, Global Insight, in which he has argued, inter alia, for the creation of a tribunal to try the crime of aggression and for the crimes being committed in the invasion of Ukraine to be treated as genocide. Today, Andrii Kostin is in conversation with Dr. Mark Ellis, the Executive Director of the International Bar Association. Please welcome both of them.
Well, welcome back to the IBA. In some ways, I can say it's a bit of your home, of your long history with us, and of course, more recently, in the involvement with the IBA in assisting you and others in Ukraine. Welcome to the audience, and as we do this every year, as you know the drill, we'll have an opportunity to have you be able to engage directly with the prosecutor. I'll go through some areas that I'd like to talk about, and I think the first one, Mr. Prosecutor, is really a more general point of view after World War II, and I think solidified by the end of the Cold War. We really did look at a new world legal order, I think. It was based on political and economic integration, human rights, these kind of basic principles that we'd adhere to under international law. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has violated some of these fundamental international principles. There's a debate here a bit about if Russia were in fact able to succeed in this war, what would that mean to the post-World War II, post-Cold War legal order? Is it relates simply to Ukraine, or we're talking about something that would impact the world?
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to be back at the IBA, to my family. Answering your question, in this case, the world law and order will be completely destroyed. That's why we have no right to make it happen. That's why we are engaging such a wide support in order to win this war for freedom, war for democratic values, war for human rights, war for people's dignity. And this war, which was started and initiated by the aggressor state. You mentioned the end of Second World War. And I would like to mention when International Criminal Court starts its operation. And what happened before International Criminal Court starts its operation? Before that, we have had a set of international tribunals which investigated and prosecuted different, also horrendous war crimes committed in different parts of the world, including Europe. Why? Why Europe has long-lasting peace and order after Second World War? Because all perpetrators were held accountable by Nuremberg tribunals, Nuremberg trials, trials on Far East, and UN was established, and UN Charter, which as an element, as you mentioned, fundamental value, peace and order, and aggression as an international crime was mentioned in the UN Charter. So accountability for war crimes, including crime against peace at that time, which we now call crime of aggression, accountability for these crimes gives Europe and the world decades of peace and stability. Therefore, now we have no chance to lose this war, because if you think that front line is on Ukrainian territory, you just not admit that front line is practically everywhere. It is not yet hot as we feel it in Ukraine, because we are fighting with your help and assistance. But if we lose, front line will be everywhere, because aggressors will enjoy impunity for every crime they have committed, starting from the crime of aggression.
Let me, as you've just alluded to, saying that actually Ukraine is now the front line for Europe, and it's fighting for its, not just for its own survival, but for the survival of Europe generally in the sense of the borders. You referred to accountability, a concept that emerged out of World War II, as you mentioned, and certainly out of the end of the Cold War. Accountability that would trump impunity. You mentioned about some of the international tribunals that we've had. I'm looking at Justice Richard Goldstone, the first prosecutor of the ICT when ICTR, the first tribunal coming out of World War II. But Ukraine is actually a bit different, is it not? Because you are undertaking, under your office, accountability domestically, that the responsibility seems to be on Ukraine to undertake thousands of cases. And war crimes, without question, there's evidence, overwhelming evidence, that war crimes are being committed. You've undertaken this initiative to ensure that there are domestic prosecutions, significant number of prosecutions for war crimes. But you also seem to have broadening this a bit into other areas. What's the mosaic for you in Ukraine on prosecuting the types of atrocities that are being committed?
We know that it's our primary responsibility to investigate, to document, to investigate, and to prosecute all war crimes committed in course of this aggression. When I say all, we are talking about all incidents of war crimes. And when I say all, we are talking about all types of war crimes. Since there is no war crime you can imagine that was not committed by Russia in Ukraine against Ukrainians. But we also understand that it's, once again, our primary obligation to cover everything. Crime of aggression, once again, never prosecuted internationally after Second World War, which paved the way for many aggressors to feel impunity. We need to stop it. Crime of genocide. And it's not only about case of forcible displacement of Ukrainian children and putting them under adoption, illegal adoption in Russian families. It's also about cases where war crimes were so concentrated from the point of view of victims of these war crimes on a separate, specific territories, which could lift to the level of genocide. And don't forget about the intent, which was publicly mentioned by President Putin and many of Russians, to erase Ukrainians from their nationality, from their motherland, from their culture, from their history. Altogether, it could be lifted to the crime of genocide. We believe it was committed. We need to work more in order to have full evidentiary base. And we are talking also about other war crimes committed. Of course, in order to make it structured, we also create strategic documents in time of war, with help of our international partners and friends, with help of civil society organizations. We have a strategy of investigation of international crimes. We have standards of investigation and prosecution of international crimes. These standards are applied by all investigative authorities and prosecutors. We have a specialization of our work. We have war crimes department on central level. We have 9 war crimes department in my offices in regions which are close to the active phase of hostilities, or which in territories which were under occupation. We started to create specialized services. We started from conflict-related sexual violence 1 year ago. We completely changed approach because we understood that this very horrendous crime was underreported. We changed our approach to victim-centered approach. We train our prosecutors and investigators. Now we have much more reports from people. We implied the principles of so-called Murad Code in our official documents. Then we proceed with specialization in such type of crimes which were never prosecuted before as war crimes. Crimes against environment, never investigated and prosecuted before in previous wars and conflict as war crimes. Crimes, cyber attacks as war crimes, never prosecuted before. And we all know how cyber attacks could be dangerous, not only as a weapon of war, but as instrument of international terrorism. And we need to be prepared, because if we prosecute, if we find them accountable for this, it will play a deterrent effect. Because what we are doing is not only for Ukrainian victims and survivors of this war. Once again, we know that this war is global, and what we are doing is not only for us, it's for everyone. That's why taking these new avenues, I just mentioned one new avenue of our work, crimes against cultural heritage. And it's not only about destruction and damage, which we use as an element of cultural genocide. It's also about illicit trading. Our artifacts are already on black market, and we are creating partnership with all of our partners and friends in order to help us. It's not only law enforcement and prosecutorial services of the other countries. We commend work of my colleagues of 20+ countries who opened their national investigations with regard to crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine. It's not only our historic partnership with the team of Prosecutor Khan of the ICC, which already bring us fruitful results with first arrest warrants, and the others will follow. It's also about creating partnership on a higher level to ensure that crime of aggression will be prosecuted, including incumbent President Putin to be prosecuted and other members of Troika. Because, once again, it's our primary obligation to investigate and prosecute all war crimes. we have crime of aggression in our criminal code. But people of Troika, they have personal immunity in all jurisdictions, and we can't let them go unpunished. Once again, it's our joint obligation, because otherwise the other potential aggressors will feel this impunity and will proceed with such acts of aggression in the other parts of the world.
You've alluded to two important points here in that answer. One is the crime of aggression, and one is genocide. So let me follow up on both of those if I could. Genocide first. As everyone knows, you have to have a specific intent to destroy in whole or part an ethical, national, racial, religious group. But because it's that specific intent, there is some complexity, difficulties in that. It's why you don't see it often. Are you now saying that you believe there is sufficient evidence and in specific intent for Russia's and its leaders to be indicted for the crime of genocide, either by the International Criminal Court, by Ukrainian courts? Where do you stand specifically on that crime?
First of all, we have a group of prosecutors who are specialized in investigation and prosecution of this crime. Second, we have already informed on suspicion several Russian, most of them are propagandists, who incited Russian troops for genocidal actions. We have also one verdict of court against Russian propagandists who publicly called on killing of Ukrainian children. But this is only the beginning, because we all understand that in order to have a strong case on international level, we need first to be open in order not to limit ourselves to two previous cases of genocide which were finished with conviction verdicts on international level. And this is my discussion with those who work in this direction, with academicians, with judges, with former judges, with lawyers who help us and who are in discussion with us, saying that let's not limit, because the genocide is a wider crime than only two cases in Rwanda and in Srebrenica that have conviction verdicts. We need also to work in all other directions. That's why we collect all evidences of genocide in order to proceed on national level and on international level. But we have no right to lose this case. Therefore, our evidentiary base should be stronger than even we believe it should be.
That refers back to on the international level, to the International Criminal Court. Certainly they have jurisdiction over the crime of genocide, so we'll see. We have the prosecutor here tomorrow. It also, court has, and you've mentioned now, the crime of aggression. It has that crime as well. But for legal issues, procedural issues, the court does not have jurisdiction over the crime of aggression against Ukraine. We don't need to go into that, but it simply doesn't. That would require either a special tribunal, international tribunal, and I suspect that's to ensure that you get over this hurdle of head of state immunity, or trying something different. Lots of discussions about what type of modality should be used for the crime of aggression. Two questions. Do you believe that the international community will in fact create this new structure, this new truly international tribunal for the crime of aggression, or do you think it will be in a different model, and if so, what is it?
I believe that special tribunal should be created. It should have jurisdiction over Putin and other members of Troika, and it should be of international dimension. Because once again, crime of aggression is not only crime according to Ukrainian law. Crime of aggression is international crime. And in order to prosecute and to punish those who started this war of aggression, who are preceding this aggressive war, the response should be international. Because in this respect, not only Ukrainian victims of this war will receive their feeling of justice, but also it will play a deterrent effect. Not every potential aggressor now in the world is the member of Rome Statute. We understand that the ICC has really limited, I would say, jurisdictional rules are restricted, so they are limited to a specific situation which is very difficult to predict in the future. We all understand that Security Council of the United Nations, unfortunately, in most of the aspects will not serve as an efficient instrument because of the veto rule rights which exist in the Security Council. So that's why we need to create an international mechanism, an international judiciary instrument in order to prosecute and to punish those who started the war of aggression. And while legal discussions are ongoing, we are not waiting. Starting from 3rd of July of this year, in Eurojust in The Hague, we have opened and launched International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression, where Ukrainian prosecutors, together with prosecutors of the other members of Joint Investigation Team, which is Lithuania, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Slovakia, and Romania, together with prosecutors seconded by Department of Justice of United States, they're already building this case. So they're preparing the case for the future tribunal. Once again, we're not losing time. We understand that discussion is not very easy. But let's come back to 1 year ago. 1 year ago, there were only few countries who officially supported the idea of tribunal. We were fighting first half year of war just for idea to create tribunal. Now we are talking about legal modalities. The only condition Ukrainians will accept is that Putin and other members of Troika will be prosecuted and tried by this tribunal. This is important not only for Ukrainians to feel justice, but let's not forget about Ukrainian servicemen, Ukrainian militaries, who yesterday were civilians and who are killed in course of this aggressive war, protecting our land. Punishment for the crime of aggression would be the only matter of justice for them, because they have been killed by the aggressor in the aggressive war. And if leadership of Russian Federation would not be held accountable for this crime of aggression, it will mean that our Ukrainian servicemen were killed without any punishment.
Setting that, kind of bifurcating that particular crime, the crime of aggression, and some of the complexities, whether it's head of state immunity or exactly what the modality is. We do know that on the international level, the ICC now has its first indictment, arrest warrant against Mr. Putin. So the ICC is playing an exceedingly important role. Ukraine has accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC. The ICC has opened up its first office outside of The Hague in Ukraine, and yet Ukraine's not a member, a state party to the Rome Statute. Why hasn't Ukraine not signed on to the Rome Statute if, in fact, the ICC is playing such an important role in assisting Ukraine in ensuring that there's accountability for the crimes being committed by Russia?
First of all, there is a full set of national legislation which allows ICC and the team of Prosecutor Khan to conduct their activity in full. And you see the results of our, I would say, historic partnership with team of Prosecutor Khan, first arrest warrant, not only against high-level Russian officials, but against incumbent president of Russian Federation. And this was done, it's not only historic in its sense, it's also historic in its speed. Because before, the ICC in previous years and years ago, it was criticized by some colleagues as a long working institution. Now, with team of Prosecutor Han, whom I personally commend for their commitment to work and to work very efficiently, we practically built this case in several months for first arrest warrant. And what is also important, you all know that ICC is a complementary mechanism. When national institutions are unwilling or unable to prosecute specific war crimes, we, Ukraine, are willing and we are able, unless we have no jurisdiction, like in case with President Putin, who has now arrest warrant from the ICC. And this is very important because this cooperation with the ICC is fundamental for Ukraine. And historic level of cooperation, when we are 100% cooperative and transparent, providing all evidences in a very rapid manner, gives us both a possibility to deliver justice in time. Issuing arrest warrant for war crime committed in course of war during the war, it's a historic achievement both of ICC and of my team. And we need to commend the team of prosecutor for this. Opening of field office is a signal of, I would say, sustainable work of the team of ICC in Ukraine for years, because war crimes will be prosecuted, investigated and prosecuted for years, and maybe even for decades. With regard to Rome Statute, my position was always that Ukraine should ratify Rome Statute. It's in the hands of the parliament, and I believe, in coming future, you will see Rome Statute ratified. While at the moment, from the point of view of the work of Prosecutor Han and the ICC, they have full set of instruments to do it.
Thank you for that robust answer on that question, because a lot of people have asked that. I want to switch, and while I'm doing so, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask the prosecutor questions. So as I'm asking this next question, if you have a question for him, just go ahead and proceed to one of the microphones, and I'll make sure to call on you as I'm going through this. So you could just line up there if you'd like. The United States has played a critical role right now in defending Ukraine, providing military, financial support to Ukraine, as well as European countries, but the United States particularly. It has also tended to relax a bit its cooperation with the International Criminal Court. But we're seeing a potential shift here in the United States. Politically, we are witnessing it right now, where there's questions about whether or not there will continue to be support from the United States for Ukraine against the war from Russia. How worried are you that there will be this paradigm shift in the United States? And if it does happen, what does it mean for the efforts in Ukraine?
For us, our fight for our freedom, for our territorial integrity and sovereignty, so for liberation of our country from the occupier, is, I think, equal to our fight for justice for all victims and survivors of this war. So these are two issues which are interlinked, because there could be no long-lasting peace without justice. Everyone should admit it, and everyone should live with this formula in his or her head. This is important. What I feel from our partners and friends from the United States is its unique level of support. Our cooperation with Department of Justice, with State Department, with other, I would say, institutions in accountability, in our accountability endeavors, is also historic. Let's think also, let's only mention the law which was passed on last December by United States Congress, allowing United States to cooperate with the ICC in case of Ukraine. This is an incredible first step. Let's mention once again the Department of Justice, who is the partner of our participant, of our joint investigation team. It's a unique The prosecutor who is helping our prosecutors, together working with them, to build the case on the crime of aggression, its unique elements which were never seen and never predicted before from the point of view of United States. So we are understood, we are heard, we are in a very open and transparent discussion. We also work with Department of Justice on, I would say, specific cases. And I will be happy if we will have first suspects from, Russian perpetrators, which will be identified as suspects by Department of Justice. It's extremely important. It's not only sharing of our workload. It's about signal to Russians that not only Ukraine prosecute them, not only ICC, but many other countries. Actually, we are in negotiation with our colleagues from different countries, some of them having universal jurisdiction. It's also about sending a signal to Russians that there will be no safe haven, even when years passed, for them to travel safely somewhere. Your question is very important to Ukrainians and to Ukraine, and actually to all of you. Once again, we need to win in both fights. We are sure that our support from United States and from European Union, and actually from many other countries, will be long-lasting, as much as long as we need. Because it's not, once again, it's not only for us, it's for all of you.
Hans?
Michael Giesen from Berlin, and it's great to see you again, André, and to listen to the very convincing and forceful statements that you're making. Wonderful to have you back here. I want to ask a slightly different question, and that is, the Western partners of Ukraine...
Michael, do me a favor and tell the audience you're from which country you're from.
From Berlin, Germany.
Okay.
The Western partners of Ukraine are asking Ukraine a lot of things at the moment, like exemplary democracy, respect for the rule of law, rooting out of corruption. There are lots of issues that have been raised. My question is, at the current point in time, are you able and willing to commit all of these things, or do you have to say, at this moment we're at war, we will need some exceptions on this. We cannot follow all of these requests at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for this question. First of all, everything we are doing now in time of war, not only to make Russians accountable for war crimes, but also to cleaning our country for all other problems we have had and we have at the moment, we are doing not because we are requested by our partners and friends. We are doing for our people. And this is the main signal we always communicate with our partners and friends. We are doing it now in course of war, and we are doing it even more efficiently than it was done before. Why? Because the country is more united. And if you touched the issue of fight against corruption, as Prosecutor General, I will tell you very responsibly, there was no such massive reaction on any element of corruption now than it was before. So we are reacting on practically every fact, even in course of war, even when we have limited resources, because we cannot make our law enforcement authorities larger in numbers. But we do it for our people, because we need to build new Ukraine after the war. Because demand for justice from Ukrainians is not only against Russians, it's just to live in just community, in community where people are heard, where their rights are respected, where their dignity is respected. Therefore, my office is also coordinating this work. And I will tell you, it's not only about corruption, and within corruption, it's not only about elite corruption, which is usually, highlighted on high political level as an evidence of fight against corruption. My work is concentrated in parallel in 3 directions. First, combating corruption at all levels. High level, medium level, I will point out later, and petty corruption. This is important because for people on the ground, in some occasions, it's not important when some minister is, for instance, arrested. It's important that local police officer or tax inspector are not bribing them. And this is critically important because the people live in their communities. Second is fight against illegal influence of oligarchs. This is historic fight. This is important because oligarchs in Ukraine, they feeded this corruption at all levels, including this medium level of corruption in many state institutions, because the work of, the business in brackets of oligarchs is squeezing Ukrainian economy from money, from our resources, using quasi-legal solutions. What do I mean quasi-legal? When people in some ministries, who are not changing for decades, ministers are changing, and people in middle level are not changing. And when they know where, in which instruction, in which regulation, what to include, and then we are talking about mining, energy sector, agriculture, and many other big businesses. So this corruption should also be combated, but oligarchs should lose their influence. And third is organized crime. Organized crime is always close to the war. We are fighting against organized crime because they are like mafia, but they are doing illegal business, while oligarch structures are also created like mafia, but they are working in more or less legal community. Organized crime, they also, when they collect a lot of illegal funds, and when they try to bribe with this fund, to corrupt state institutions and law enforcement agencies, this, of course, this creates risks for the country. When we're talking about organized crime, we're talking mostly about now drug production and trafficking. It's not only about chemicals. We also start to see the import of cocaine and heroin to Ukraine from Europe. We have several joint operations with Europol now, some of them in Ukraine, some of them abroad, in Romania and in Spain during last months. So we are committed to do it. And I think that within this scope of work, we are delivering this to our people. And this should be seen by every partners and friends which are supporting us.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Ken Schmidt from Southern California. My questions relate to the very pragmatic aspects of the end goal here. Of course, that would entail the apprehension of the perpetrators. And specifically, are you contemplating for perpetrators that cannot be apprehended some sort of trial in absentia? And then as a follow-up to that, does the prosecution of course, the most senior perpetrators, does that necessarily preclude some sort of ceasefire? We hear all these calls for cessation of the war, some sort of peaceful resolution along various different geographic lines and so forth. Would that path or that resolution necessarily be an end to discussion of war crimes, because it would be part of some ceasefire that the war crimes wouldn't be prosecuted? Or is there a way that there could be some sort of resolution and the war crimes still be prosecuted?
The last question. First question, it's very simple. When we have a case, when our victims identified perpetrators, which is one of the most challenging, actually, issue to identify a perpetrator, when they identified, when we have full set of evidences, we can't wait until sometime we find out this person, because victims, they want justice to be delivered now. That's why we are prosecuting and we have trials in absentia. But all of these perpetrators are equipped with defense lawyers from free legal aid, and what we do as a country, we need to ensure that we ensure fair trial for everyone. That's why we have a unique cooperation with our partners and friends. We're training prosecutors, which is natural for me, yes, to support it. I also support training of judges who hear these war crimes cases. And we have my advisor, Sir Howard Morrison, former judge of International Criminal Court. He's dealing with this project, that training Ukrainian judges, and with the help of initiative of Mark Ellis and our partners from the United States, we're training defense attorneys from free legal aid system. So to ensure that they are totally equipped with understanding of the law in practice, and this was actually what I tried to ensure, that they will be trained to be impartial. Because we are all Ukrainians, and we are all angry, but we need to be impartial for the sake of justice. And second question, you are the second person who asked me about it. First was young cadet in West Point Academy. Yes, whom I met, I spoke with before the cadets, and he asked me about this question. I will tell you very frankly, how can I negotiate with people who killed, raped, tortured our children, our women, our victims and survivors? And if you will ask the same question to yourself, how you will answer this question? Is it worse to compromise justice for victims and survivors just for the sake of any negotiations? How can we compare temporary ceasefire with compromising justice? Compromising justice leads to impunity and to new crimes. We know this. Because of weak response on occupation of our land in 2014, on annexation of Crimea, because of this, we are now facing this war.
Thank you.
I mean, it's such an important question, because the majority of those trials in Ukraine are trials in absentia, I think about 90%. But the other point that you're alluding to is there's no statute of limitations for these crimes anyway. So,
yes,
you know, this goes on for as long as it needs to go on to ensure that they are brought to justice. I think that's exceedingly important. Homer Moyer.
Mr. Prosecutor, thank you for being here today. That's important to us. My name is Homer Moyer. I'm from the United States. I have a follow-up question on official corruption, which is such a difficult issue for many countries. Many of us have seen aggressive action taken by President Zelensky and others, including actions against Ukrainian officials, which is often unusual in fighting corruption. We also know of Ukraine's investment in training its own anti-corruption prosecutors, excuse me, and investigators. And my question is, how do you, from your position, assess where you are now in this struggle to deal with official corruption, and what do you see in the years ahead?
Thank you. First of all, you mentioned my president. It's his personal commitment to clean our country from corruption in all instances. And this is very important because we have strong political support, and this support is sustainable and long-lasting. From the point of view how we act, as Prosecutor General, I am responding for all investigative authorities. We have several of them: National Police, State Security Service, Bureau of Economic Security, State Bureau of Investigation, and National Anti-Corruption Bureau. And all of them have their place in our fight against corruption. All of them has jurisdiction. What I wanted to ensure, and I think we got this result, now all of them are working together. We have even a lot of, I would say, a lot of joint operations. It's important because when some of the investigative authorities, they have their own opportunities or own capacity, and the others should be an investigative authority, we combine it in joint investigation teams. We combine prosecutors from different departments. It's also about raising trust between different law enforcement authorities. They will compete in every country, but my obligation is not to allow them not to fight against each other, but just to compete. And this is quite unique for Ukraine, because if you somehow tracing what's happening in our country, you haven't heard, I think, about any conflict between different investigative authorities for the last year. This is our success. And when everyone is complementing each other, then we have more result. And this work will be long-lasting. This work will be sustainable. Because once again, Ukrainians want to live in country where their dignity is respected. And corruption against people is, I think it's a significant hit against their dignity.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. My name is Amit Becher. I'm the president of the Israeli bar. First of all, I want to thank you for your word here, and the Israel bar has supported Ukraine from the beginning, me personally. Unfortunately, and on October 7th, we felt what massacre and genocide is, while hundreds of unhuman terrorists invaded Israel and the cities and kidnapped, tortured, burned alive families, and of course abducted and held hostage of more than 230 children, people. Some of them are babies, children, elderly with needs. And my question here is how, from your experience, you deal with the need to treat those, I don't call it, it's not terrorists, but whatever you capture in the rule of law way, which you should. On the other hand, understand that the public and people cannot understand how such horrific actions are treated in what we lawyers know, that we need to have due process and representation. How do you feel the conflict between the need to act on the regular, quote-unquote, normal procedures against unnormal, unhuman, unthinkable actions, when only people who see it in first, or as a prosecutor, you see the document at first sight, can understand the horrible situation that it occurs?
Thank you for this question, very important. I think the answer is very simple. They want to dehumanize us, committing such horrendous crimes against Ukrainians. So the same crimes were committed against Ukrainians.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
They want to dehumanize, but we are human beings. We can't come down to their level.
One of the things we have other questions, so I'm gonna move on.
Thank you for those words, they're important, and I want everybody to take the opportunity to help us bring the children and women home. That's first, it's all we need. It's a human call. Thank you. I know that you emphasize with that. I know that everybody who is a human dignity here cares about that. Help us bring the 230 hostages, including 30 babies and women, home. Please, thank you, people.
Thank you. This gets...
I will a little bit respond. We fully understand your situation. We are investigating case of forced deportation of 19,000 of Ukrainian children. We have thousands of civilian hostages which are illegally detained in Russia and occupied territories. And we are calling on creation of international mechanism how to bring children and civilian hostages back home, because for them there is a lack, once again, a gaps in international law, humanitarian and criminal. And we need to be together, because children and all other civilians, they have no right to suffer from any war and conflict. But in order to create it, we need to be together. And we, lawyers, the role of lawyers in this is crucial, because when I'm talking with politicians, all of them support, we need to return your children back home. We need to release all civilian hostages, but we don't know what to do, how to do it. We as prosecutors, we will do our job. We will investigate and make accountable everyone whom we found who commit these crimes. But it doesn't mean that automatically all civilians, be it grown-ups or children, will be released and returned home. So you are lawyers, we are lawyers. It's our obligation before these people to help politicians to create mechanisms that would be efficient and that would work, and our babies, our children, and our civilians will be returned home to their motherland and to their families.
Thank you.
One of the things I want to reinforce, because you said earlier, and this has been said time and time again in Ukraine as well, and that is how, and it's difficult for lawyers in Ukraine, defense lawyers we've experienced, to even take on these cases, because as the gentleman had indicated, there's this conflict, this natural conflict of saying, under these horrendous situations, we simply do not support the idea of due process for those that have alleged to have committed these crimes. But you have said, and Ukraine, I've met other Ukrainians who have said, this will be part of Ukraine's legacy, is how they undertake these accountability mechanisms. This will be a long-term legacy, but I think that's one of the reasons you've been quite adamant about adhering to international standards, even under the most difficult circumstances of these domestic trials.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Okay, Ken.
Thank you. Andre, I know I don't need to introduce myself to you personally, but just to the audience, my name is Ken Murphy from Ireland. I'm currently the chair of the Bar Issues Commission. And having answered so many questions at a policy level, I wonder if I might just raise something more of a personal question. You and I served for many years in the IBA together, sat on council together, we were on committees, we used to go to the bar executives meetings. I can often recall sitting next to you at dinner, having a cup of coffee and all those chats. And neither of us at any time could have imagined that you would have the awesome responsibility and role that you have today. And my question is more, and I hope you don't mind me asking it, more as a friend and as a personal question. Given two things, first of all, for most of us, unimaginable horrors that you and your staff come across, the evidence of unspeakable atrocities that have occurred in your country, on the one hand, and also the enormity of the responsibility you have to get this right in terms of how you respond to it. We talk all the time in the IBA and in the legal profession around the world now about wellness in the profession and mental health in the profession and staying on an even keel. And having a life outside of the professional responsibilities in order to be able to perform the professional responsibilities. I'm not asking you at all, and really it would be wrong of me to suggest to you, I don't want you to say that you suffer in any way from the stress of the incredibly important and difficult role that you and your staff fulfill. But just as a personal question, how do you maintain your humanity in the face of the inhumanity you come across? How do you decompress outside of the job, take a little time off, and be able to remain on an even keel to be able to deliver what you do? It's a personal question. I hope you don't mind, Andre, but I'd be interested.
Thank you, Ken. First of all, we have 3 pilot projects about mental resilience and psychological resilience of our prosecutors. 3 different. We will choose on which we will concentrate. So I'm dealing with this like for the last year. And this is important for me because I tell them all the time, I need you alive and I need you in good health. And you actually, when we win the war, you need to win it being alive and being healthy. For you, for your families, for our country. And coming back to your second question, I don't know. I have no time to think about it. I don't want you to be in such circumstances, but I hope that if you will be at my place, you will also act as me, because I know you for many years. So Ken, thank you. Really have no time to think about it, why it happened. It just happened because, I think maybe because we are all together. When talking with Mark, talking with my friends, talking with my partners, with, you all the time you feel this support. And I will tell you that literally I feel it physically. Even when we speak with Mark by VTC, I feel it physically. And this support gives me more energy, and I share this energy with my people and their work.
You most certainly have our support.
And I apologize because we've now come to the end, and I apologize for the other individuals who want to ask a question. But I think you end this with your remarks in the sense of bringing together the International Bar Association and everything that it has done and will continue to do to support you, to support Ukraine. And it comes back to that first statement, this is not just about Ukraine. This is about the international community, and it's about the very principles that we, as members of the IBA, try to uphold every day. Mr. Prosecutor, thank you so much for being with us on this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.